We are on the record at 2:04. Today is June 29, 2020. This is the video deposition of Joshua Dixon in the matter of Mayra Martinez versus Sheriff Mike Williams et al. Would counsel please identify themselves for the record, and the court reporter will swear in the witness.
Kirby Johnson on behalf of the plaintiff.
Gabby Young on behalf of Mike Williams and City of Jacksonville.
Ms. Young, you might want to put your mic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You want to go again?
No, I heard you.
All right.
Did you?
Yes.
Okay.
Paul Darajati on behalf of Officer Borisade.
Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Dixon. My name is Kirby Johnson, and I represent the plaintiff, Mayra Martinez, in this matter. I'm going to be asking you some questions about a call that you went on back in April 27th, I believe, 2016. I know it was a long time ago, so we'll just do the best that we can today. First things first, can you please state and spell, I'll spell your name for the record, please.
Joshua, J-O-S-H-U-A, Dixon, D-I-X-O-N.
Okay. And what is your date of birth, Mr. Dixon?
June 3rd, 1977.
And what is your, well, do you live in Jacksonville?
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Dixon, I may let you flip your mic on too, since you have a mask on. Thank you.
Mr. Dixon, where are you currently employed?
The City of Jacksonville.
And what do you do for the City of Jacksonville?
Fire Rescue Lieutenant.
And how long have you worked for, is that Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department?
Yes.
How long have you worked for Jacksonville Fire and Rescue?
Approximately 18 years.
Did you have another job prior to working for the City of Jacksonville?
Yes.
As a fireman?
No.
Or as a, what did you do before working for the City of Jacksonville?
General contractor.
Okay. Well, when you first got hired to work for the Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, what was your position?
Firefighter.
And are you still a firefighter?
Yes.
Are you also EMT?
Yes.
How long have you done that? For the past 18 years as well?
Yeah.
Now, Mr. Dixon, you've done a good job so far with verbal answers, but sometimes in natural conversation, it's easy to nod your head or say uh-huhs or uh-uhs, but if you would just have a verbal response to all the questions, that'd
Sure.
be great. Thank you. And if at any point in time you need to take a break, just let me know, so long as there's not a pending question we can accommodate, okay? I meant to do that at the beginning, but we'll get that in now. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Dixon, do you have any independent recollection of any of the events or the call out that you received regarding Mayra Martinez?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Okay. Do you remember being called out to the Sallyport location on April 27th, 2016?
Very vaguely. I mean,
Okay. Okay. Do you recall why you were called out there?
I believe I do.
Okay. Do you mind telling me why you were called out to the Sallyport on that date?
To check out an inmate.
Okay. What were you told, or what was the reason for the dispatch?
I don't remember what the dispatch said.
Okay. And we'll get back to some more questions about that in a little bit, but I just want to have a general understanding of what you can recall from memory. Okay. Do you recall where Miss Martinez was when you arrived on the scene?
Not from memory.
Okay. Do you recall if Miss Martinez was handcuffed when you arrived at the scene?
I do believe she was when I saw her.
Okay. Do you recall speaking to anyone when you arrived at the scene?
Yeah, I spoke to several people.
Okay. Did you speak with any police officers that were there?
Probably at least one.
Okay, but do you Do you recall the names of any of the police officers you spoke to?
No, I mean, I've heard it in my case and stuff, and this, but, I mean, I don't recall. I couldn't spell anyone's name. It's
Okay.
not that familiar.
Approximately how many police officers did you speak with when you were there?
I have no idea.
Was it more than one?
Probably. There's usually several police officers at the...
Okay. All right. I would like to show you what we'll mark as Plaintiff's Exhibit A. This is a... If you wouldn't mind taking a look at that. Do you recognize what that is, Mr. Dixon?
It looks to be a PCR,
And what is a PCR?
a patient care report,
Are these done on every call out that you would go on?
only on ones with patients.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you some questions about this document here. Up at the top here, it says incident location 500 East Adams Street, Jacks 0118 Duval 32202. Is that the jail?
It's one of the buildings in that complex. I don't know which specifically entrance that is, but
Okay. Do you recall what entrance you specifically went in on that on
the
April 20th?
Sallyport entrance.
Okay, thanks. Now it says Rescue 13 Shift C. What is Rescue 13 Shift C?
It's the unit that I was on and the shift that it was.
So you were on Unit Rescue 13? Okay. How many other people were on Unit Rescue 13?
Me and a driver.
Okay. Do you recall the driver who was with you?
I have no idea.
Okay. So would the drivers change depending on the call-outs?
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, just sometimes I had the same person. Sometimes I didn't. I mean, I can. It's written on here. It should be somewhere.
Okay. All right. Now I want to scroll down a little bit to the narrative portion at the bottom of the first page. Do you see where it says narrative? here?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Now the first line here, it says CC PT states she was assaulted by JSO officer and her stomach hurt per JSO officer Borisade. Does this in any way refresh your recollection of what you recall from the scene on that day?
I guess. Yeah.
Yes?
Yes. I mean,
Okay. Now, the next question is, it says per JSO officer Borisade. Does that mean that JSO officer Borisade told you that, or did the patient tell you that?
Rejection of form.
so this was about 4 years ago. So I can guess and tell you what my guess would be.
Okay.
But, I mean, it says per JSO officer, so that would be what I would guess.
Okay.
I wrote this much more recent to the event than...
Yes, sir.
Right.
Understood. Understood. The next line, it says PT upon evaluation states she was hit in the stomach. Do you recall seeing any marks on her stomach or anything along those lines?
I did not expose her stomach.
Okay. Do you recall any other officer who may have been on the scene informing you that she was hit in the stomach?
I recall that she said she was hit in the stomach.
But you don't recall anybody else at the scene confirming that?
I don't recall.
Okay. When you first made contact with Miss Martinez, what was the first thing that you did?
I don't recall.
Would you normally have a conversation with the patient to try to figure out what their ailments were?
There's a million and one. I don't remember. I mean, normally there's so many variables that could occur as to who I talked to, when I talked to them. So
Okay.
I don't recall.
Prior to this incident, had you ever been on a call out to the jail or the Sally Port?
I had.
Okay. And on those prior calls, would you often speak with the officers that were there with the inmates?
Sometimes, well, the majority of the time we would speak with the facility. We would go to the clinic.
Okay.
So we would talk to like a nurse or a whatever. They have their own clinic.
Okay. Did you speak with anybody in the clinic in Miss Martinez's case?
No, we were downstairs in the Sally Port.
Okay. Do you know if anybody from the clinic provided any care to Miss Martinez?
I'm not aware of anything.
Okay. Going a little further down in the narrative here, I'm going to read, it says, both myself and Lieutenant Snipes reiterated to the officers present that we felt it would be good for the patient to be transported for evaluation either by JFRD or themselves. As an EMT, were you trained in making the determination of when to transport patients to the hospital and when not to?
I'm going to object to form.
There are Florida statutes that govern transport or non-transport, as well as written policies that govern transport. It's less up to my individual decision and more up to the statutes and laws and stuff.
Okay. Were you trained in those statutes through Jacksonville Fire and Rescue
I'm
Department?
aware of the statutes.
Okay. All right. And how did you become aware of those statutes?
It's in our policies.
Okay. Well, we talked about you mentioned the statute, and then you also said that there's policies in place. So is there both? Is there both statutes and policies in place that guide you on when to take somebody to?
Right. I believe the policies are written based on the statutes.
Okay. And whose policies are we talking about? Is that Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department's policies?
Right.
Okay. And you were trained in those policies, I'm assuming?
We're provided them. It's not like a training process.
Okay. In your 18 years at Jacksonville Fire and Rescue Department, did they ever send you to training on this issue?
Objection to form. What issue?
On the issue of the statutes and the policies of when to transport somebody to the hospital?
I don't recall.
Can you tell me the number of the Florida statute that you're referring to?
I starts with a 4. I don't have it by memory.
Okay. Can you tell me generally your understanding of what the statute is as far as when to transport a patient to the hospital?
It's very there's a lot to it. It's not. It would be very difficult to attempt to summarize. I don't feel like I'd really summarize it. Like if I was concerned, if it was something I was not automatically aware of, I would open the book and reference the statutes.
Understood. Understood. Does the statutes give you leeway in making the determination of when to transport the patient and when not to?
I don't know that that's. It gives definite yeses, definite nos, and if there's some safety issues, of course there's a little bit of room, but
Okay. And based on your understanding of the statutes at the time, you felt that it would be a good idea, or I'm sorry, you felt that it would be good for Miss Martinez to be transferred for evaluation. I'm sorry, yes, on the bottom of the narrative, the sentence starting with both myself and Lieutenant Snipes reiterated to the officers present that we felt it would be good for the patient to be transported for evaluation either by JFRD or themselves.
Okay.
So my question is at the time that you wrote this, closer to the incident, or at the time of the incident itself, based on your understanding of the statutes and policies, you felt that it would be good for Ms. Martinez to be transferred to the hospital.
Objection of
Is that correct?
So, based more on, I guess you would say, experience at that point, because it's such a litigious society, we can't see, we can't x-ray, we don't diagnose, like I said, we can't. So we always refer to a higher trained person.
Okay.
If they're willing to go, if the patient refuses, by law, if they're awake, alert, and oriented, and they refuse, I cannot legally kidnap that person and force them to go.
Okay. If somebody is alert, awake, and oriented, can somebody else make the decision for them of whether or not they get medical care?
Check the form.
Join.
That's outside of my scope.
Okay. If Mayra Martinez was alert, awake, and oriented, could an officer on the scene override her decision and say, no, she cannot go to the hospital?
Objection of form.
I do not know their policy. I don't know their legal limits.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Can a police officer sign a form AMA on behalf of one of your patients?
They don't sign on behalf if a patient is physically unable to sign and the patient is refusing and meeting those criteria for whatever reason, whether they don't have limbs or they're handcuffed. If they can't sign, then we can accept their signature. They cannot make the decision. If the individual wanted to go to the hospital, I have the ability to say that person can go to the hospital.
Okay.
But she refused, so it's outside of my scope of control.
Okay. Now, you said that she refused to go to the hospital. Can you tell me where it says that in the narrative, or if it says that?
I can look for it. I haven't memorized it.
Okay.
Patient. Denied any medical claims upon myself interviewing patient. Would only talk about assault by the LEO. Explained to the patient that we were not involved with that aspect of the event. We're only there to evaluate and attend to any medical needs she has. So at this time, she was not complaining of any pain or any injury. She just states she was hit in the stomach.
Okay. Maybe you can help me understand this better than if she had no complaints, no pain, why would both you and Lieutenant Snipes reiterate to the officers present that you felt it would be good for the patient to be transported for evaluation either by JFRD or themselves?
Section,
Join.
I'm having a hard time understanding what you're asking.
Sure. I'm trying to reconcile the two statements that you just made. You're saying.
Why would we, okay, so I understand what you're saying.
Well, we'll strike that question for now, and we'll get back to it. Maybe if I ask this question, it'll help clarify. There's a sentence in here. It says, following conveying evaluation, JSO officer having custody of the patient determined that they would be transported to hospital by jail staff. What does that, can you help me understand what that sentence means?
To me, we weren't transporting the patient. So if they needed or had a complaint later, the jail staff would take them, is what the way I read that.
Okay. So in other words, you weren't going to take her to the hospital, but JSO was going to take her to the hospital. Is that what you're saying?
Objection of form.
So she had no medical complaint.
So she was struck in the stomach, I believe, and then you guys were called to the scene. And then ultimately you said that you felt it would be good for her to seek additional treatment. I'm just trying to reconcile all of these.
Objection of form.
I was not there when she was struck in the stomach.
Okay.
I was told she was struck in the stomach. She said she was struck in the stomach.
Could
She
you
complained of no injuries.
okay. Could you visibly evaluate her stomach?
I couldn't, and she was stating she had none, and I wasn't willing to expose her against her will. She was wearing something that you would have had to completely expose her to examine her.
Okay. What is an AMA?
AMA is against medical advice.
Okay. On the notes section here, it says JSO officer AMA refusal. What is a JSO officer AMA refusal?
It's just a note that the JSO officer was the one signing for the patient.
Okay. Okay. Do you know why the patient couldn't sign?
I believe she was handcuffed.
Do you recall Ms. Martinez saying that she did not want medical attention? Or that she...
Yes, from the moment I opened the door of the truck, she said she didn't want us.
Okay.
She said she didn't ask for us, didn't want us there, didn't need us. Was very emphatic that I had to ask her to let us evaluate her.
Okay. Did you put that in your report?
No, I don't think I did. Yeah, kind of. Yeah. Patient denied medical complaints. Would only talk about the assault. I explained that we weren't involved in that aspect. We were there to evaluate and attend to any medical needs.
Okay. And you did, and you believe that you did that?
So she didn't have a medical complaint.
Okay.
So there was, yes.
All right. So if she did not have a medical complaint, then why would you feel like it would be good for the patient to be transported for evaluation?
Objection.
I don't know the events that happened before. I don't know the events that happened after. I don't know what substances she's taken in. So there's too many variables for me to just say she's good. It's easier and more appropriate to say she's should be evaluated by someone higher if you think that she's got a medical complaint.
Okay. All right. And so you made that determination. You made the strike that. Okay. Do you recall speaking with Officer Borisade at the scene?
I believe so.
Okay. Can you describe Officer Borisade for me?
I believe he was a black male.
Okay. Do you recall any of the conversation between you and Officer Borisade?
No, I don't.
Did Officer Borisade tell you that he hit her in the stomach?
I don't recall.
Okay. Other than Officer Borisade, did you speak with Officer Andres that was on the scene?
It's 4 years ago.
Understood. How many times has a JSO officer in your 18-year career signed an AMA refusal on behalf of a patient that you can recall?
A bunch.
Checked to form.
Several. Like, often they'll call if they're concerned, as in this case, patient had no complaint. They still think there might be something so they have us check. We saw nothing obvious, and she complained of nothing. So,
Okay, so if you did your evaluation, she complains of nothing and you see nothing, why would she need to be transported?
Objective form. Asked and answered.
she didn't need to be transported. She didn't have a medical complaint.
Okay. Were you informed of who punched her in the stomach?
Objective form.
I don't recall.
Were you... Okay. Do you know who called fire and rescue to report this incident?
We don't receive the calls directly.
So how does it work whenever you receive a call? Do you receive the call from dispatch?
Right, the bell goes off, and on the computer it'll say where you go.
Okay. Does it give you any sort of indicator of the type of incident that you're responding to?
Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't.
Okay. Do you recall if that was given in this case?
I don't recall.
And would you, when you arrived, were you in an ambulance or were you in a fire truck?
I was in a rescue unit.
Okay. Is that what's the rescue unit? Is that like more commonly referred to as the ambulance?
Right. Rescue typically is 911. They do emergency calls. An ambulance typically is anything from taking someone to dialysis for non-emergencies. Like,
Yes, sir. Thank you. Did you ever follow up with anybody at the jail after this incident, after you left the scene that day?
I don't recall.
Did you take Miss Martinez's vitals?
We took them as a group. I probably at least checked her pulse and felt her skin and looked at her pupils. I don't think that I was the one that took her blood pressure and such, but
Okay. When you say we as a group, who are you referring to?
JFRD.
Okay. Who else from JFRD, other than you, was at the scene that day?
I can't remember. I think Snipes was there. I don't remember the rest of the...
Now, at the time of this incident back in 2016, April 2016, were you a lieutenant at that time?
I think I was.
Okay. So is it common for 2 lieutenants to be called out to an accident or an incident?
Or, yes, or a captain and a lieutenant, or,
Okay. So, other than you and Lieutenant Snipes, were there other JFRD members there?
yes.
Okay. Can you tell me approximately how many of them?
I think it was a ladder. If it was a ladder, there should have been at least 4, and then we had 2.
Okay. All right. Why would a ladder be dispatched to this incident?
Because what often happens is a call comes in as a unknown problem or a sick person, and you arrive. If we arrived in the rescue with 2 people, and that person happened to either be in cardiac arrest or go into cardiac arrest, now we cannot transport that person because it takes 2 people to do CPR. So, and every call in Duval County, as far as I'm aware of, that has a medical complaint, they'll send 1 suppression apparatus and 1 rescue apparatus. It could be a ladder, it could be a tanker, it could be a chief.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. Do you know if and I think I asked you this already, but other than Officer Borisade, do you recall speaking to anybody else at the scene?
Yeah, I believe I spoke with several people. I don't remember who and what the conversations specifically were.
Okay. At the time that you were on the scene, were you aware that Officer Borisade was the individual who punched Miss Martinez in the stomach?
Object the form.
I don't know if I was or wasn't. It's 4 years ago.
Okay.
I got 4 kids. Time flies by.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Did you make any changes to your narrative report at any point?
Yeah, I think it got closed. I had to reopen it. I mean, I don't remember specifically, but
Okay. When you say it got closed and I had to reopen it, what do you mean by that?
so we'll run anywhere from at that station 12 to 15 calls in a 24-hour shift. Each call can take up to about an hour. So when you have a volume of calls, you've got a queue of calls and you type your reports. And sometimes you'll click one higher, and after it opens, you don't see that it clicked because it's just a number until you input the information. And then you have to have, so you close that, then you start to write the next report and realize the times don't match because one happened before the other. So then you have to go have them reopened and moved. And
Okay. Was one of the issues here Officer Borisade's signature?
when it closes, you lose any signatures.
Okay. And is that what happened here?
Right.
Okay. But you recall that Officer Borisade was the one who signed the AMA.
Right.
Now, I know you said when you arrived, she generally was saying that she did not want your assistance at that time. At any point in time, did she specifically tell you, or, well, let me ask you this first. Did you ever tell Miss Martinez that you thought it would be good for her to be transported for further evaluation?
So she didn't generally, she explicitly yelling, saying she had no She didn't want us, she didn't need us. Like there was, as far as what, I would not have a reason if she has no complaints to make her or to try to coerce her to be checked out if she's saying she has nothing wrong. Typically, I mean, like I said, it's 4 years ago.
Yeah, I understand. Did you ever have a conversation with Lieutenant Snipes about this when you were there? Did you and Lieutenant Snipes have a conversation about whether or not to transport Miss Martinez?
Maybe. Ultimately, as a rescue officer, I'm the one in a medical call that's in charge. On a fire, he would be the one in charge. Because there's fewer rescue units, they can arrive and render care ahead of time. If she had no complaints, the easiest thing would be to take her to the hospital. But if she's refusing and has no complaints, you can't take her to the hospital. I couldn't kidnap her, I mean.
Certainly. Do you recall ever asking Miss Martinez if she wanted to be transported to the hospital?
That would be normal for me to ask her if she wanted to.
Okay. Did you ever ask Officer Borisade about transporting Miss Martinez to the hospital?
I think I talked to him less. I mean, I would be guessing to answer. It's been so long.
Okay. At any point, did Officer Borisade indicate to you that he would make sure she was transported for medical treatment?
Object to form.
I would be yes. Most often, when an officer has called us, they would prefer that we take them to the hospital. Because they've called us, they think there's something. So, even though she refused, he wanted her to be checked. We checked her to the extent that we could, and she still refused.
Okay. She refused. Strike that. And I may have asked this. If I did, I apologize. But do you recall specifically informing Miss Martinez that transport to a medical facility was an option for her at that time?
I don't recall specifically, but that's standard practice.
Okay. Do you recall?
My job is to help people. If they want help, I'd be glad to help them. She didn't want help. I expressed, you can go, we'll take you, we'd be glad to take you. She refused. She said she didn't have any injuries. So,
Does it say that in your report?
it doesn't. I mean, I don't think it does. Well, it does say that she had no complaints.
Does it say that she refused transport?
So, it doesn't say the details of it, but it says that I interviewed the patient myself.
Certainly.
As the one that's responsible if something goes wrong, that's what I would have been.
Right. Because I think you said that you were the medical that was in charge.
But
Okay. And because you are the medical in charge, you make the determination of who gets transported and who doesn't. Is that correct?
A patient typically does.
Okay. Okay. The patient does.
Right. If someone's got a complaint and they would like to go to the hospital, we
Okay.
take them to the hospital.
All right. So I'm going to read this sentence. It says, following conveying evaluation, JSO officer having custody of the patient determined they would be transported to the hospital by jail staff. So when I read that, it looks like the JSO officer made the determination. Is that fair?
Join.
The wording is funny. I got an associate's. So what I understand that to mean is that if she went to the hospital, that the hospital staff would take her because she would be evaluated again upon intake. I probably could have used more clear language, I guess.
That's okay. When I read that sentence again, it seems like the determination has already been made that they would transport her. Is that fair?
Objection informed.
No, she had no complaints.
Following conveying evaluation, JSO officer having custody of the patient determined they would be transported to the hospital by jail staff.
So there's two routes.
Yeah,
There's no question.
yep. Statement.
Okay. Do you recall Officer Borisade or any other JSO officer telling you that they would transport Ms. Martinez for further evaluation?
I do not recall.
Okay. After reading this narrative, does it refresh your recollection of any officers informing you that they would transport Ms. Martinez for further medical evaluation?
In reading this report, I could make an assumption based on practice that there's two routes to transport a patient. Emergency, if she was dying, I don't have to ask, I can just take her. Non-emergency, if she goes inside the facility and says she's got a headache, anything, they send her to the hospital as well. So what I would, I guess, assume or guess based on this is that we wouldn't be taking her. If she were to go, they could take her. It was non-emergent at that point. But like I said, at that time she had no complaint at all.
Can you help me understand then why you felt it would be a good idea for the patient to be transported?
Objection informed. Asked and answered.
So I'm not a physician, and I can't. Women's bodies are totally different than men. There's so many things, and I don't understand it. So I would always refer to someone that, if she had a complaint, to have someone else look at it.
Thank you. About how long was your total dispatch call to the Sally Port that day? How long were you there?
I don't know.
Okay. On page 3 of the report, if I'm reading it correctly, does that say 1936-28 call received? Does that mean that JFRD received a call at 7:36 p.m.?
So I don't work in dispatch. I don't know when 911 call happens in Duval County. It goes to the police dispatch first as priority. At some point, once they've established whatever, police dispatch transfers it to JFRD dispatch. So I don't know exactly what number that references.
Okay. It says here, patient contact 1945. Does that sound about right to you? Does that mean that at 7:45 is the first time you made contact with Ms. Martinez?
Sounds. I mean, it looks like that's what it says.
Okay. And then, does it say when you left Sally Port?
I'm not sure.
Okay. What it says here, time available on the top of page 3. What does time available mean? Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha. Is that something that comes from the dispatch and all that?
It's all CAD generated stuff.
Okay. So you don't type that in?
No, sir.
Thanks. Other than this document here, did you generate any report or any documentation about this incident?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Do you know if Lieutenant Snipes drafted any sort of documentation about this incident?
I'm not sure.
Would it be common for there to be one of these reports for every incident, or will there be multiple reports for every incident and every person there writes one?
Objection to form.
There's only one patient care report. Only one refusal.
Okay.
It's a different division of the department, so I don't know what they do or don't do.
What do you mean by they're a different division? Are you talking about the what are you talking about there?
There's a suppression division,
Okay.
and I'm not an officer in that division, so I'm not sure.
Okay. The AMA refusal, is that a separate document from the patient care report?
In the selection screen in the process, there's the wording of all the refusal. It says everything that you pretty much tell them. We'd be glad to take you if something changes. No, you don't have a complaint now. It's all written out, and that's an AMA refusal. I thought it printed on here, but I guess it would be redundant to.
Okay. And so it's got a list of. Well, strike that. The AMA generally has some statements on there acknowledging that by signing it, they're acknowledging that it's against medical advice that they're not being transported. Is that fair?
So, it's, in this case, it's acknowledging that we're willing to transport her, that we have checked everything we can check, and that if she has a complaint, we'd still glad to take her, but if it changes and she has a complaint that develops, we'd still be glad to take her.
Okay. And Ms. Martinez's signature has never been on an AMA as far as you know.
Right. Handcuffed patients can't sign behind their back. They can't see the computer to.
Right. And your report also doesn't state that she refused transport. Correct?
I'm not sure. Are you asking me?
I am asking you, yes, sir.
So it states that the JSO officer said her stomach hurt, not that she said her stomach hurt. It states that she had no visible, notable injuries. It states that I couldn't fully assess because of her clothing. She answered questions appropriately, was neurologically attacked. She denied LOC. She denied any medical complaints. So,
But did she refuse a transport AMA?
Objection of form.
Objection.
so the way I understand it is she was declining transport, saying she didn't have any complaint.
Okay.
So I have a box if you refuse, I have a box if you don't refuse.
So which box did you check for Miss Martinez?
Refuse. She refused that she had any complaint.
Okay. Where is that box on here?
It's not on paper. It's a window, not a box. It's a
Okay. All right. So is there any sort of documentation that would that you have that says that she refused transport AMA?
The JSO officer was able to witness that she had no complaint, and his signature was to acknowledge the fact that we offered her transport. She was refusing against our advice that, hey, we should check you out if you're concerned. And that's
Which officer? Witness.
Officer Borisade signed the witness.
Okay. So Officer Borisade said, well, I don't want to strike that. As you sit here today, are you aware that Officer Borisade was the one who punched her?
Check the form.
I wasn't there before.
Okay. Do you know who called 911 or who called JFRD?
No, we don't take the calls.
Okay. Would Mayra Martinez have called JFRD?
No, she was handcuffed.
All right. Okay. It says here JSO Officer AA Borisade, number 72073, having custody of patient, signed the AMA refusal and was witnessed by Engineer Brinson. Is Engineer Brinson somebody that works for JFRD?
Yes.
Okay. Was he, who is Engineer Brinson?
It appears that he was my driver that day.
Okay. Would he have more information about the AMA? And the
No.
signing of the AMA?
No.
Look on page 4 here of the patient care report. It's top it says NOC at scene and incident section changed to trauma assault. Did you insert trauma assault in the report?
So this was printed by somebody. I usually don't see them in this form. So I don't know if that's because it was dispatched as something or it was, I don't know the answer.
Let's go back to page 2 of the incident report. The bottom of it, it says cause of injury struck by blunt/thrown object. Mechanism of injury, blunt. Did you put that in the report?
I'm sorry, I don't.
To the bottom of page 2?
Oh, cause of injury.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I would be the one.
And that would have been blunt, was that blunt trauma? Was that what you mean by blunt there? Mechanism of injury, blunt? Like blunt trauma?
There's a cause of injury. There's choices of what caused the injury. And it was struck by a blunt or thrown object was the most appropriate selection.
All right. Back on page 1 here, it says, patient upon evaluation states that she was hit in the stomach. Is that the blunt force that you were talking about on page 2 there?
So the narrative I can type, and then on the details, you're selecting a coded number.
Okay.
I guess they state use it for statistics or something.
Did you have the option of putting none?
I don't know. I don't think so.
So even if there's not an injury, you have to put something there? Is that what you're saying?
So I don't know how to best explain it because I don't do a lot of computer work. But if you select some things, you have to select other things. If I select I transport, I have to put in mileage. If I don't transport, I don't have to put in mileage. So depending on what algorithm or whatever box you check, if it's dispatched as a trauma, then I don't know which initiates which, but may say you have to select one of these things to close a report.
Okay. And you selected blunt as the mechanism of injury?
I believe so.
Okay. At the top of page 2 here, it says evaluation of patient's vitals conveyed to Officer Borisade. Do you recall conveying the patient's vitals to Officer Borisade?
I don't recall it specifically.
Okay. Was that who you were primarily interacting with from JSO? Is that fair to say you were primarily interacting with Officer Borisade?
So normally whichever officer either called or has custody, their handcuffs are on the patient. That's the point of contact that I would talk to.
Okay. Did Miss Martinez ever tell you who punched her in the stomach?
Check the form.
I wrote that she said she was assaulted by a JSO officer and her stomach, well, I didn't write it. I believe she pointed. I don't know that she knew a person's name or.
I'm sorry, I'm not, I don't follow you there. Do you mind? Strike that. Did anybody else inform you of who punched Miss Martinez in the stomach?
Check the form.
I don't recall from memory. I think I've done several, been asked questions about this a couple of times, but I don't remember specifically who else might have said what.
Okay. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of whether or not you knew Officer Borisade struck Miss Martinez in the abdomen while you were there on the scene.
I don't recall now, 4 years later, whether I knew it or not at the time.
If you did know it at the time, would you inform the officer who punched her in the stomach about what her vitals were?
I would inform the officer every time an officer has to sign.
Even if it's the officer that causes the trauma or the injury?
Check the form.
There were maybe, most often when you go into Sallyport, there's a dozen officers in there, or more. I can't say that I've ever, I don't know. What's your?
Did any of the officers that were in there inform you of who punched Miss Martinez?
I don't
Objection of
recall.
form.
Okay. All right. Is there anybody else from JFRD who may have information about this?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I don't think I have any other questions at this time.
Can we go off record for a second?
Looks like it's 3:06.
Thanks.
We are back on the record at 3:10.
The city has no questions.
I have a couple of questions. Again, I represent Officer Borisade. Real quick, on page 2 of the report, at the bottom where it says incident details,
Yes.
you had talked about check boxes earlier. Are these the result of those check boxes, all these bits of information?
Yeah, the only part that the only big blank where I can type in stuff, well, is the narrative or like the vitals.
Okay.
But the actual vitals.
Right. Okay. So when about halfway through that paragraph where it says disposition, non-transport, refused treatment / transport, that's a checkbox that she refused treatment and transport, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Form.
And where it starts to say responded from, is that a separate checkbox? That's not part of the same thing? On that same line?
Yeah, I think that's the next box.
Okay. That's just saying you came from your station house, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So is it fair to say you actually did document on this report that you refused transport?
Form.
Right. So I couldn't close the report without selecting that she refused transport. Or like I said, if I click transport, I'd enter mileage and all that.
Sure. Okay. I have no other questions.
I've got one. Do you mind if I take that back for a second? On the disposition here, where it says non-transport refused treatment / transport responded from quarters, does it say that she refused transport or that an officer refused transport on her behalf, or does it not say?
It doesn't say, but only the patient can refuse. The officers can't refuse for the patient.
Then why did Officer Borisade sign the AMA on her behalf?
Objection of form.
He didn't sign refusing her transport.
What was the AMA for?
She refused the transport. She was unable to sign.
And is that based on your recollection?
There's only one. Light switch is on or off. There's, right.
I understand the light switch.
I mean, that's pretty clear. Like, there's no. Right.
Okay. Could Officer Borisade refuse transport on her behalf?
No. He would have preferred probably if I could have taken her. If she would have allowed us to take her. I mean, that's totally a guess, but.
Okay. All right. No further questions.
That concludes the deposition. It is 3:14.